Scream is a slasher satire directed by Wes Craven. A group of movie-addicted teens are being stalked by their town's slasher, known as the Ghostface Killer. The film stars Courteney Cox, Neve Campbell, and Drew Barrymore. Guys, welcome back to Garage Slasher-thon, where every day for the month of October we revisit a slasher movie. Scream is the movie we're going to be talking about right now. One thing that's interesting about Scream is I watched Scary Movie before Scream. So when I watched Scream, it wasn't really effective because all of the gags are also in Scary Movie. Turns out what happened is the screenwriter was working for Scream, and he wanted to take the movie in a different direction. He was more inspired by movies like Airplane or Naked Gun or those goofy, campy kind of movies, whereas the studio wanted a more serious movie but with some satirical elements. So he went off to do his own scary movie, and they retitled this movie Scream. And then when Scream came out, he was like, oh, I'll just make it a parody of Scream. Which kind of doesn't work in retrospect because Scream is already a satire, and now they're doing like a dumb parody of a satire. Kind of gets lost in translation, in my opinion. It's like as if they did like a parody of Spaceballs. It's like Spaceballs is already kind of a parody. Or if they did like a parody of American Psycho, and it's like American Psycho is already kind of a parody, you know? Yeah, so in retrospect, it's a little weird. But anyway, Wes Craven directs this movie. This is the second time we do a Wes Craven movie on this marathon. First time was obviously A Nightmare on Elm Street. Wes Craven is very much a fan of the genre he helped spawn. He made the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, which went on to make huge commercial success. But he's also a fan of other slasher movies that were coming out at the same time as his slasher movies. He really liked John Carpenter's Halloween, and he really liked the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. As a matter of fact, Wes Craven went vegan because he watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre and he never wanted to eat an animal after watching that movie. So yeah, he's obviously a fan of horror and a fan of the slasher genre. Great opening to this movie. I think that's the one thing everyone recalls in this movie is that beautiful opening with Drew Barrymore. And it kind of does the psycho subversion where you have this big title star Drew Barrymore who, yeah, nowadays she just has a shitty talk show no one cares about. But back in the day, Drew Barrymore was like the it girl, you know? She was Never Been Kissed, she was in all of these movies, and 50 First Dates, if anyone remembers that. This movie kind of predates 50 First Dates, but she was in all of these kind of it girl movies, and for her to be in like a slasher movie, people were pumped, only to find out that she gets killed off in the first scene. That opening is what made the writer want to do this movie. He had that opening in mind in a dream. Apparently he had this nightmare that he got slashed across his vocal cords and he was screaming for help, but no one could help him. And that's what happens to Drew Barrymore's character in that opening scene. But they also introduced the fact that the reality of this film is a reality where teenagers know horror movies. They do constant references to Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Silence of the Lambs.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Is that the one where the guy had knives for fingers?
Yeah, Freddy Krueger.
It kind of seems obvious nowadays that a movie would do that because we've had so many parodies since then, like Behind the Mask, Cabin in the Woods, or Scary Movie. So we're kind of used to that, but for the time when this movie came out, it was really like something unique to see a slasher movie where people in the movie reference other movies.
It's like Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs when she keeps having flashbacks of her dead father.
But this is life.
And I think that's kind of where the problem lies when watching Scream with a modern lens, is that we've seen every plot subversion done a million times at this point through movies, like I said, Cabin in the Woods and all those movies. So we kind of expect it at this point. We expect to be subverted. But when this movie came out, there wasn't that idea of subverting it. Slasher movies were very, very formulaic up until that point. So to have a movie that just says, yeah, let's acknowledge those traditions and let's just flip it on its head. It's something that really wasn't done at the time. It's really no surprise that this movie was produced by Miramax, because Miramax was kind of doing that in the 90s, despite being very controversial for having Harvey Weinstein at the head. Yikes, I said his name. Don't say his name 5 times in the mirror. But you also had like these filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez who were working for Miramax that were like, okay, let's do a kung fu movie, but let's do it different. Or let's do a slasher movie, but let's do it different. I think that's kind of what made this movie stand out at the time. It was kind of that Miramax style mixed with the slasher movie that was very much still alive at that point. One of the ways that they subvert your expectations is the surviving girls at the end of the movie, who are Neve Campbell and Courteney Cox. They're badasses at the end, which is not very much a thing up until this point. Girls are usually the final girl, but they manage to escape. Like movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Halloween, it's always they escape somehow, or they don't, you know? But in this movie, the final girls are like the kind of smarter ones versus the guys who are kind of the dumb idiots. And it's not in a hammy way whatsoever. It really works in this movie because it's a movie about taking traditions and flipping them over its head. Wes Craven also uses that fourth wall break style in order to kind of throw some shade at some people. He talks about the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels and how they're really not good.
First one was, but the rest sucked.
He didn't write, or from what I know, he didn't direct any of the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels, so it's kind of him doing a little fuck you, a little fuck you. Yeah, I kind of like that moment in the movie. And then another subversion that happens in the movie is one of my favorite things about this movie, my favorite moments, is you have one character who's like the movie snob. He knows everything about slasher movies.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie.
And he says, in order to survive a slasher movie, you have to avoid having sex, avoid drinking alcohol, and avoid saying, I'll be right back. And who survives at the end of the movie? The character that has sex, the character that says, I'll be right back, and the characters that drink alcohol. That's a clever subversion right there. And they don't bring much attention to it, but they just kind of do it. So yeah, there's a lot of satire on horror movies nowadays, and we're going to be talking about a few in the remainder of this marathon. It's really hard to judge this movie fairly with a modern perspective, because the idea of doing a parody of horror movies has been done to death ever since. So I respect the movie for being the first of its kind, but I think if a younger person were to watch this movie in 2023, they'd be like, oh, I've seen that kind of thing in Scary Movie, or I've seen that kind of thing in Cabin in the Woods, or even on Netflix, they have a bunch of horror comedies. Creep is another one. So yeah, the idea of doing a horror comedy that comments on the genre has been done to death ever since Scream, but Scream was kind of the first one to do it. And yes, it's a comedy. Yes, there's some funny moments. Yes, they do some fourth wall breaks. But the moments of terror still work in this movie. The gore is still there. Ghostface Killer is still very effective as a slasher in this movie. I think they make him a bit too goofball-y. They make him a little too incompetent, which kind of works when you find out the reveal, but as like a threat in the moment, it doesn't really scare me all that much. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Scream. It's like it's a good movie, but unfortunately it's been ripped off to death. I just wanted to debunk a few things about this movie before going. So the first thing I wanted to debunk is there's a character in this movie that says that if you pause the movie All the Right Moves with Tom Cruise at the very right moment, you see his penis.
I'm gonna swing by the video store. I was thinking Tom Cruise and All the Right Moves.
You know, if you pause it just right, you can see his penis.
I wanted to see if this was true. I googled it and I got an answer. It's 100% true. And I'm sure after Scream came out, video rental sales of All the Right Moves skyrocketed because everyone wanted to see Tom Cruise's schlong. I'm not allowed to put a picture up, obviously. YouTube does not allow me to dox Tom Cruise's penis. But I will describe it in detail. He is, in fact, circumcised. And I'd say there's a good girth to the schlong. There's a good girth. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to talk about is what came first, Ghostface Killah or Ghostface Killer. So Ghostface Killah is one of the members of the Wu-Tang, and I knew Ghostface Killah predated the movie Scream, but I always thought it was interesting that his name was Ghostface Killah, and then there's Ghostface and kind of came after it. Turns out the story behind that is that he is not named after the guy from Scream, obviously. He is named after a kung fu movie called Mystery of Chess Boxing, where a chess master is also a kung fu master, which is very in line with what the Wu-Tang Clan likes. Anyway, those are the two things I wanted to check. Guys, have you seen Scream? I haven't seen many of the sequels. I think I watched Scream 2, 3, and 4, but I haven't seen this new boom with Scream 5 and 6. Scream 6 was filmed in Montreal, and I remember hearing about it when it was getting filmed. But yeah, the too many sequels in my opinion. But from what I saw of Scream 6, it kind of looked interesting, maybe. I don't know, maybe. Wasn't Jenna Ortega in Scream 6? Could be. Guys, what's your favorite Scream movie? What's your favorite Wes Craven movie? Comment below, let me know, and I'll see you guys around. Take care.
Scream.